Welcome to the English edition of La Magia de Sanar podcast. My name is Carla Melo, and here I want to share with you my internal healing process. What inspired me to share all this is to see tons of women believing that they are alone in their journey, thinking that this is happening only to me, feeling that no one can understand them, feeling guilty and stressed about not finding the magic pill that would let them to get the result they want in their lives. So, what I want you to realize is that any problem that we repeat in our life is just a symptom, the surface of the iceberg, a little wound in our skin, because what is really inside it goes far beyond what we can see with our eyes. But anyway, whatever you're struggling with right now, I just want you to know that you will handle it. You will find the answer you are looking for, and the best of all is that the magic formula to get it, it's already inside you. We all have everything we need. We just need to find the way to get it. So here, I will share with you my magic toolbox with all the resources that I have discovered along this beautiful process called healing, where I have to get to know myself more than ever. And hint hint, this will be your superpower. And I just want you to dare to do it. Dare to reinvent yourself and become the powerful and amazing woman you deserve to be, so you can shine and live every single day full of magic, with purpose, freedom, happiness, following your intuition, and above all, realizing that you are enough and you can come through anything you want. Follow me on Instagram as carlameloc333. I will be so glad to chat with you about anything you wonder about this beautiful process. Good morning with everyone. Welcome to a new episode of La Magia de Sanar podcast, English edition. Today I have a very special guest because her knowledge was the masterpiece that I was looking for many years to recover from amenorrhea. She is an expert on teaching you how to create balance between health and fitness. Her superpower is giving you the right tools to find real freedom with your body, exercise, and body image. She is amazing at learning you how to feel all the magic you can experience in your life without guilt and anxiety around food. Her name is Elena Kunicki. She is a registered dietitian specialized in women's health. Welcome, Elena. I'm so honored to have you here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. I love how you can I don't even have to tell you an introduction to do for me because you know my entire method. So you can just do the intro, I don't even have to say anything. You just know what to say.
Living that experience was really awesome.
So fun.
I would like you to tell us and share all your journey. How did you become an amazing tool to help women? Did you always know that this was your mission, or how did you get here?
Yeah. So I had a good relationship with food for the most part. And looking back now that I've been through all this stuff myself and coached so many women through this process, now looking back, I know that it wasn't as good as it could have been, but I never thought much about it when I was in my early years. I just ate what I wanted. I wasn't too concerned about food. But then around puberty, I gained weight. And this is common. Most women gain weight around puberty. Unfortunately, that's not really talked about so much. So when women gain weight, this is usually around puberty. This is usually when their issues with food start, because society just always demonizes weight gain. And we don't understand that it serves a biological function. We gain fat typically around puberty because of estrogen levels and certain things to help us get our first period. But I didn't know that. All I knew was I was gaining more weight. I was already kind of like the bigger girl in my friend group, even though I was kind of just medium sized, but I had a lot of thin friends. And then around puberty, I got more chubby. And that's when I started to have issues because, around puberty, this is when you're starting to care more about romance and, relationships like that. And I got, people called me names in school and stuff like that. Even though I was very I would fight back if somebody called me fat or something like that. But it still stuck with me, so that once I got taller and I kind of stretched out, and that weight that you gain around puberty redistributes, which is what it would do naturally if we didn't start restricting around that time. I still had in my head these body image issues from that time when I was more worried about how I looked. So around high school is when I started to diet and at least try. I tried to go on diets and I tried to start losing weight actively. And it wasn't really working. I was never really into structured exercise like running or going to the gym or really athletics. I liked to be active and I did gymnastics, I did dance, I liked being outside, but trying to get myself to do a structured workout routine, I wasn't really getting into it at first. I was kind of like yo-yo dieting. I would go to the gym consistently and I would start to try a certain diet and then I would kind of fall off the wagon. And this is where I first started to get a taste of binging, but it was nothing like it turned out later on. But I definitely had that feeling of, okay, I cheated on my diet. I didn't want to do that. And then I remember I would feel sad after, maybe cry and feel a little bit guilty about it. And it kind of went on like that for a couple of years. And then my senior year of high school, I did some crazy diet and I finally succeeded. And I got that taste of that success of losing weight. And that made me very motivated to continue on that path. I started running a lot. I started dieting more. Things were not so bad at that point. I still went out. I still ate out with my friends. I wasn't too strict with things. But then when I got to college, I became really, really afraid of gaining back the weight that I lost. And I heard from people that a lot of people gain weight their freshman year of college. And I was like, no, that is not going to happen to me because I had gotten all these compliments on my weight loss. I was so finally feeling like I had achieved what I wanted to achieve, that I was finally feeling like I was the hot girl that I always wanted to be within my friend group. It's a very superficial thing. I was like, I'm not going to lose that. So I was ready to do anything to prevent myself from gaining weight. So when I got to my freshman year of college, this is when I started to get really, really crazy restrictive with dieting. And, I would not go out, or I would, I would count my calories and eat extremely low calories, exercising more and more and more and more and more. And then this is when, I stopped living. Yeah, exactly. And this is when I lost my period, started getting really bad acne, my digestion started to get messed up, and I just became really preoccupied with food, where I would always be thinking about food. I was planning out what I was going to eat weeks ahead and just becoming really obsessive with it. And then around that time, that's when my binges started. And then binging was my main issue, binging and restricting for the rest of college. So when I went to college, I was initially intending to be something with animal science, whether it was a veterinarian or something along those lines. But then when I got really into this nutrition and exercise, I decided to switch my major to become a dietitian and study nutrition instead. And it was really about wanting to be able to control my own nutrition and fitness more. So I wanted to learn as much as I could. And it was what I was the most interested in, because when I wasn't doing schoolwork, I was reading about the best diet. I was reading about fitness. I was exercising. I was planning out my food. So it was all that I thought about outside of school. So I figured, let me just switch my major to this. So no, I did not know that this is what I was going to end up doing. But then luckily, after college is when I recovered from all of this stuff. And then I used that nutrition degree and being a dietitian to now help other women who have similar struggles.
So it was mostly to be fit that you choose this career.
Yeah, I was not thinking when I first switched and chose this career, I was definitely not thinking I was going to help people with eating disorders, because I didn't even admit to myself that I had an eating disorder at that point.
And what was the breaking point that you experienced to decide taking it seriously? I have an eating disorder. I need to do something.
Yeah. After I graduated college, my undergrad, I moved back home to New York City with my parents to do my dietetic internship, which is this year-long program where you have to get clinical experience working with other dietitians and then also take master's classes. And it's this really intensive program. When I came home and moved back home, I was in the middle of a fat loss phase with a coach, because Like I said, I'd been binging for, ever since that freshman year of college. I started binging, and between every binge, like I binged at least once or twice a week. And then the rest of the week was me trying to compensate and recover from that binge. And then also trying to figure out how to prevent the next binge. So I spent all my time focused on that. And I still couldn't get it under control. I still kept binging, and the binges were only getting worse. And because I was binging, I got really into lifting and bodybuilding at that point. So in my head, I was like, I knew that you weren't supposed to be constantly in a calorie deficit and constantly trying to be in a fat loss phase. You were supposed to go through fat loss phases and bulking phases and maintenance phases. In my head, I was like, if I could just complete one fat loss phase without binging, get to, this weight, the weight that I was before, but this time with more muscle and, look more lean and whatever, then I'll be happy. Then I will bulk, or I'll increase my calories. I won't be so restrictive. But in my head, I was like, I just need to finish one fat loss phase. So I kept trying new different ways for me to be in a calorie deficit and lose fat, get leaner, but it wasn't working. So I said, okay, let me hire a coach. Maybe if I have a coach, I'll be accountable and I'll actually do it and I won't binge. That'll be enough for me to not binge when I have the urge to binge. But it still wasn't working. So I actually lost fat in that cut, even though my binges were at the worst they had ever been, which just shows how I was eating so much in the binges, but I was in such a deficit throughout the week that I was still losing weight. So when I got home, I was probably the leanest that I had ever been. Like I had built up a good amount of muscle and I lost fat, but my binges were at their absolute worst. And I still couldn't get my period. Had been on the birth control pill for the whole time of college. Since I lost my period, my gynecologist said, here, just take the pill. This will help you regulate your cycle.
And how long were you without your period?
4 years, about 4 years.
Wow.
At different points, I tried to go off the pill and I still couldn't get my period. So that was starting to concern me. I was like, that doesn't seem right. That's probably not a good thing. My digestion had hit its lowest point. Like I was having issues daily with constipation, diarrhea, bloat, gas, like extreme symptoms that I didn't have before. And then I had gotten blood work done and I had, several nutrient deficiencies. My blood pressure was low. And I was just looking back at the 4 years and like what I wanted now for my life. And I was like, this is just not a good way to live. I can't live this way anymore. I'm clearly not healthy. I'm not happy. Now that I was home, in college, because I was so consumed with food and my weight and exercise and fitness, I sacrificed a lot of social stuff. So I didn't make that many friends in college. Not that I probably wouldn't have made that many regardless, because I'm more of a person who makes like a few close friends, but I didn't go out. I didn't like try and be social and do things because I was afraid I was going to binge if I was around food or if I was drinking.
Exactly. It wasn't about that your personality. It was about more this fear of being around food or being out of control.
Exactly. Yeah, there was a lot of fear. So when I came home, I have all my close friends. They all live still in that same area where I grew up. So I was like, I want to be able to go out and eat with them or go out and get drinks with them and not be stressed out. And I was like, I cannot do that right now. That's not going to work. So I was just looking at the past 4 years, looking at what I wanted for the future. And I was like, I spent this entire 4 years trying to stop binging, trying to gain control around food, and it's just not working. So I came to terms, and I think I kind of already knew this, but I was trying to deny. It was kind of in denial about it. I finally realized that, okay, probably restriction is a component here. Like me constantly trying to lose weight, that has to be related to all of these things. That's when I decided I have to stop this. And I was like, okay, well, I have to let myself eat what I want more. I probably have to like not force myself to exercise as much if I don't want to. So I was like, that means that I'm probably going to gain weight. And that was my biggest fear. But I kind of came to terms with that and was like, okay, if I have to gain weight, so be it, because I'm not happy, I'm not healthy, and this is not the life that I want to live. So that's kind of when the breaking point was.
And did you do this alone, or did you hire someone else like to guide you or some support? Because, it's super scary to take this step.
Yeah. So initially I read the book Intuitive Eating. This is a big issue with people who are dealing with eating disorders when they first read that book or start learning about intuitive eating is they just turn it into another diet, basically, because that's where their mind is at. They're in that like restrictive place. So it's easy for them to turn everything into a rigid rules and a diety type thing. So when I read that book, it wasn't quite helping me. It was helping a little bit. Like I had stopped tracking macros and I was trying to eat when I was hungry, stop when I was full. But as you know, and as anyone else who's listening to this who struggled with this stuff knows, it's not that simple. When you've been not listening to your hunger and your fullness for so long, it's not that easy to just like eat when hungry, stop when full. It's very confusing. So I was
so disconnected of your body.
Yeah. So I was trying to eat. I was like trying to decide, okay, like when am I perfectly hungry and like when am I perfectly full? And I was overanalyzing it. And that was causing me to still not eat enough and still kind of be restrictive. And the binges were getting better, but they were still happening. And I was still feeling a little bit out of control and anxious around food. And then I found some resources on Instagram of different dietitians and people who talked about eating disorder recovery. And I started to understand more that it's not about in the beginning, in order for you to get your hunger cues back to where you can just eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, you have to really not think about that and just think about eating what you want when you want until you don't want it anymore. Because mentally, that's usually pretty clear. Like I knew when I wanted food and I knew when I didn't want it anymore. Now that part was scary because it took a lot of food for me to actually get to a place where I mentally felt satisfied. But once I started doing that, that was the ticket. That's when I was like, oh, okay, like this is a lot of food. But one, I'm enjoying it. Two, I can really tell my body needs it and it was responding very well. I was feeling so much better. My digestion like immediately improved. My binges basically immediately stopped once I did that. And then around that time, I hired a dietitian to help me through the process. Like I had already kind of started the ball rolling, but I wanted her help specifically with getting my period back, making sure my digestion was in a really good place. And just like, I knew there was more physical and mental healing to do. So I wanted support through the process. And I found a dietitian who specialized in all that stuff, similar to what I do now. So I did get support.
And how long does it take for you to get your period back?
Yeah, so say I really started on the right path where I was really eating until I was fully satisfied and really letting go of all my rules around food. I would say I started doing that around July, August. And then my binges, like I said, once I did that, my binges stopped basically immediately. So I think my last binge, actually I do remember my last binge was July 4th, 2018. And then I got my period back, I would say probably about a month after I fully stopped exercise and I was eating what I wanted, when I wanted, stopping when I felt fully satisfied mentally. From that point, I think it was about a month. So I was pretty fast. I got it back pretty fast.
And how can you define this thing of binging? Because I learned that it's not about like how much you eat. If you are like constantly in diets and such, you can like feel like really, really anxiety or whatever, just eating a cookie. And that could be also like 5 cookies could feel like a binge. How can you define a binge?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that. A binge like really more so has to do with how you feel while it's happening. So typically it's an episode of something. Usually it's triggered by some sort of negative emotion often triggers it. Or it can sometimes just be like you get a craving for something and then that makes you anxious because you don't think you should eat it. And then you get that anxiety spiral happen. And then you're kind of trying to resist the urge to eat. You want to eat, but then there's another part of your brain that's saying, no, don't eat. And then another part that's saying, yes, eat. And then eventually something clicks and that side that says, yes, eat something basically wins. And you go into this, like I call it binge mode because it really feels like another like mode, another part of your brain that you step into. And then it's like you just lose control in that moment. And you might even have a voice in your head that's like, don't do this. You don't want to be doing this, but you're doing it anyways. And you can't stop yourself. And then eventually, for some people, it might just be like you said, like 5 cookies or something. For others, usually it's more than that. Like for me and most of my clients, it's a lot of food that's consumed in a short period of time. But again, it doesn't always happen that way. Like I had binges. It wasn't as much, it was like not very much food, but I just felt very out of control. And then eventually you kind of come out of it. And there's usually like a wave of depression, sadness, guilt, anxiety, like so much remorse for the fact that you did that. And it feels very out of control. And then it's sort of like you come back and you're like, oh my God, why did I do that? And it all sets in that it happened. So it's very much like a roller coaster of emotions and a clear episode of something. When you're in the binge, it's like you have tunnel vision just for food and you can't think about anything else. And that's really, to me, what a binge is, because a binge is not the same. And this is what a lot of people get confused about. A binge is not the same as overeating. It's not the same as extreme hunger. Like some people in eating disorder recovery, most of my clients experience this. They have a lot of hunger. They just want so much food. That's different because that's just you're making that choice to eat. It doesn't feel like it's literally your body is taking over and forcing you to do it, like, which is how it often feels with a binge.
And why do you think is the main reason for this to happen? Because it becomes like you said, and I have experienced also, like it's part of living, it's part of your weekly goals not to do it. And it was so much energy to avoid it, but actually you don't get to the point like, okay, why is this happening?
Yeah. And you're right. That's what feels so frustrating about it, is people who are really dealing with binging, like where it's happening consistently, they're always, after a binge happens, like I would go into action and be like, okay, how can I prevent this? What's a new strategy that I can try so that if the urge comes, I'm going to prevent it. The reason why it feels so out of control is because it's really coming from a primal survival mechanism, basically. Your body knows that there are these mental and physical restrictions that have been sitting with you. It's whether it's being in a calorie deficit, dieting for a long time, being underweight for your body, over exercising, constantly, worrying about maybe not allowing yourself certain types of foods and having those restrictive thoughts. Your body perceives that as, okay, there's some sort of scarcity in the outside environment. There's not enough food available, or maybe there is, but this body is letting us eat for whatever reason. And it's worried about your survival, because if you don't eat enough for a long enough period of time, your health starts to break down. And if that continues long enough, you will die. So your body is coming in and saying, okay, if we're not being able to eat, or if this person's not letting us eat, we're going to take over and going to send extremely strong impulses to eat from this, reptilian brain, which is the brain that controls these types of things, to try to tell the higher brain, okay, you have to go eat now. And obviously, like when you're in that place, it feels impossible to not listen to, because it's such a strong urge. Really, it's a survival mechanism, which I think is why it feels so strong.
Do you think that it's also like, because a lot of dietitians, a lot of programs teach you like, okay, this is emotional. So it addresses a lot emotional part, which was my case also. But also you don't realize that you need, or like as women, we mostly tend to eat as little as possible, but we don't allow us to eat a lot. So do you think it's like both emotional, but also like physical things that has to be like combined to reach the point to stop binging?
Yeah. So it's a big question, because it depends, like even what we're defining as emotional, like that's a very vague thing. Okay, it's an emotional issue. What does that mean? Is it that you binge when you're anxious and you don't have good coping mechanisms for anxiety? Is it that you learned early on from, maybe your parents gave you food as a reward when you were sad, so you learned that this is how I cope with sadness? Or you saw your mom going to ice cream or whatever when she was stressed out or whatever, and you learned that behavior? Or you had a very traumatic childhood and food was how you coped? Like, is that emotional? Or like my clients are dealing with a lot of emotional issues because of their bad body image and their anxiety and their issues with food and their fear of weight gain. That's emotional too, and that's contributing to the binges, and we have to work on that, but it's not the root cause of the binges. So I would say for many people, emotional work in terms of how emotions trigger binges, that I would honestly say for most people, that is not that important, because if you just eliminated the restriction part, you wouldn't binge when you were anxious because the restriction piece is gone. But there are some situations where, like I said, this might be a learned response, whether it's from trauma in your childhood or a way that your parents taught you to use food. Like there can be emotional factors, but never would I advocate for only looking at the emotional factors and not also looking at, okay, does this person have a history of dieting? Does this person have a history of body image issues or weight loss? Anything that can contribute to any sort of mental or physical restriction, guilt or shame around food. Because if that's the case, then just doing the emotional work is not going to fully heal this person because you're not looking at these other factors that are very tied to binging. So I think it's good to address emotions. It's good to go to therapy and get support for that. But if you have any sort of history of any of those things, you should also be working with somebody or at least examining in yourself where you might be being restrictive around food, and then address any relationship with food issues that you have. Because if you don't address that, that might be the full cause of your binge eating. If not, it's going to be definitely a major factor, and you need to work on both.
I think you said something super key that also is about this. How have you used exercises? Because if you have just created that relation in order to change your body, of course, that also is a trigger. How do you think that impacting this binging, the exercising? Why do you think is that important to? It's ironic because to actually build a good relationship with food, with your body, and with exercising, you kind of have to quit them all and just kind of surrender.
Yeah. So with exercise, there's so many factors with this, and it's a little bit more complex. One of the ways that exercise can influence binging is that it basically serves as another, I consider it under food rules and restriction. Exercise can fall under that umbrella. And the reason is that all eating disorders, basically, the root of it is an intense fear of weight gain. And a need, because of that intense fear of weight gain, there's a need to control and try to control our weight. So any behaviors that you are doing to try to control your weight, they are restrictions that are going to influence your relationship with food. That doesn't mean that any weight control behavior is bad, but it means that if you're gotten to the point where you're dealing with full-blown binge eating or a loss of period or these advanced stages of restriction, that means that you have to let go of all restrictions. Because if you even have even a few, you're in this eating disorder mindset where any restriction it cannot be healthy because it's only fueling this issue that you have. You need to let go of all of them and fully feel fully lean into, like you said, that surrender and trust of your body, and let your body take the wheels so that it can, it can tell you how much it needs to eat. It can tell you how to regulate your hunger cues. It's very smart, but it's a matter of tuning back into your body and allowing that to take the wheel and allowing you to really let go of all restrictions so you can relearn what it feels like to have a healthy relationship with food. So when you're using exercise to control your weight, it's another one of those rules because it's another way that you are trying to control your weight. So that's one of the reasons why I recommend an exercise break to people who are binging, is because usually there's always a piece and a component of exercise where they are trying to use that to control their weight or compensate for a binge, and they need to take a step back from that so that they can start to really just operate with no rules, and their body will tell them. Eventually they'll get the desire to move again, and then we can start to step into that more and figure out a good relationship with that. And then exercise, also there's just the factor that, again, when you've gotten to this point where you're binging consistently, where you're not getting a period, where you're having these issues of long-term restriction, exercise is going to only add to the draining of calories from your body, when really what your body needs is it needs restoration and replenishment. It doesn't need more things to drain energy and calories from it. You need to be putting back in rather than taking out. So exercise is going to contribute to that, at least structured exercise. It doesn't mean you can't move your body. If you want to go for a walk, you want to stretch, you want to go play catch with somebody, you can do that. but I'm talking about like structured, intense exercise, like lifting, running, HIIT training, that type of thing. And then also exercise can mess with your hunger cues a little bit. Like it can suppress hunger cues, and then they can come back really strong when you take rest days. And if that's happening, it's only going to make the hunger cues that we're trying to regulate more confusing, and sometimes takes longer to regulate those if we don't take the break. So it's really like 3 different reasons why I recommend that.
And I think it was key for me also this question that you ask us, like, okay, if this exercise won't change your body, would you continue doing? It's like, okay, I'm not sure that I will force myself to do it. And then you get us to a place that we don't need to do things, but we choose. That is
Exactly.
so empowerment for us. What do you think is the key to heal that relationship with food and also exercise?
Oof, the key. That's a big question, Carla. Well, with exercise, I would say, like you said, I'm not against exercise being a tool to change your body in some way. I think it can be that, you know, you can have goals for how you'd like certain parts of some people, not everyone wants that, and that's fine. But if you have that desire, it is possible to do that in a way that's not restrictive and not unhealthy for some people, but not if you still have this restrictive mindset around food and also your body. You know, okay, this is what it is. This is what the key is for healing your relationship with food in your body. I'll tell you right now. It is really separating your self-worth and your value and your ability to enjoy your life, separating that from how you look. Because all of these issues, they all stem from putting too much importance on your appearance. Because the question you asked, if this exercise wasn't going to change my body at all, would I still want to do it? Because obviously, maybe long term, you might have some motivations, like I might lift weights in a certain body part because I want to build muscle in that body part. That's a goal for how my body looks. But if I'm willing to sacrifice everything else to go, if I'm willing to sacrifice, you know, seeing my friends when I haven't seen them in a long time, or if I'm not getting a period and I'm going to go and work out, and just because I want to look a certain way, even though I know that's going to make me not get my period back, that means I'm sacrificing mental and physical health for how I look. And that's not ever going to be sustainable. So I think the deeper root of having a healthy relationship with food and exercise is that you always put your mental and your physical health first, not how you look. So these issues come from placing too much importance on your appearance. And that comes from this feeling and idea that the only way you can live a happy life is if you look a certain way. And the only way that you can, you know, feel worthy and valuable as a person is if you look a certain way. And that's just never going to be healthy. If you're operating in that mindset, you're going to do stuff around food that's not sustainable, not healthy. You're going to sacrifice your mental and physical health for certain things. And I think that's really the key and the deeper root of all of it.
And I think you're an expert in learning us like how to do this, because this fear of weight gain that we all have if we experience an eating disorder, it really sucks because we really think that it's the worst thing that could happen to us.
Worst thing ever.
And when actually it happens, I remember that I was feeling like so uncomfortable with my body, and you have this body dysmorphia that you look 10 times bigger than you actually are. But the thing is that working towards that let us know that we can do whatever we want, regardless how we look. And that's actually the key to look as whatever we want to look. Because if you know that you accept your body today, and that also was a game changer for me, that loving your body or loving yourself doesn't mean that you like what you look. It's just that you accept and you love and you are committed to your why. So that's a key point of letting yourself weight gain. And I think overcoming that fear actually lets you look how you always wanted. Because probably I was thinking we have all our perfect body preference in our head. But actually, when you just detach for that image, you get to like appreciate your body and just like don't want to look, you just like want to feel it. How do you let us get to that point, if you can summarize it? Because it was a lot of work and things, but
yeah, to be honest, it's really the only way that you get to that point is by facing those fears. So the things that you're afraid of, you have to face them, because like you said, positive body image it's people think it means like, oh, you always like how you look. But no, like you said, it means that it's really more about being more neutral about how you look, so that you can still enjoy your life and still respect yourself and take care of yourself, even if you have a day where you don't think you look the best, or even if you don't fit what you think is this perfect body ideal in your head. It's that doesn't have to ruin your day. That doesn't have to detract from your life. That doesn't have to mean that you don't take care of your body in that day. You don't feed it what it needs, go to sleep when you need to sleep, eat enough food, all those things. To me, the way that my clients get there, the way I got there, and the only way to truly get there, because so many people live in this fear of weight gain. Like most people live in that place. It's because they're letting that fear control them. Versus when you face it, when you say, okay, I'm really terrified of gaining weight, but there's two things. I'm terrified of gaining weight, but me trying to control my weight is literally taking away my life and my mental and physical health from me. So which one am I going to choose? And am I going to choose this fear and let this fear control me? Or am I going to try to allow myself to have a better life? Like, am I going to let this fear ruin my life and ruin my health and literally shorten my lifespan? So to me, even though it's hard, when you think about it that way, it's a pretty easy decision. That doesn't mean that you're going to hop right into it and you're going to feel completely good and there's not going to be any issues. No, it's going to be very hard, because facing those fears are hard. But you don't have to start going all in. Like people say, you can start with smaller steps. Like you can say, okay, this is one restriction I'm going to work on this week. Yes, I'm afraid of weight gain, but I'm going to take this step anyways and remember why I want to do this. And like you talked about, remembering your why, remembering why you don't want to feel consumed by food anymore, why you don't want to binge anymore, what that means for you for the rest of your life. Is it going to help you have the career you want to have, be a better mother, be a better friend, be a better partner, do all the things you want to do in life? Like what is the deeper reasons why you don't want to live this way anymore? When you can face those fears, they go away. And then, because the fears go away, but only if you face them. And then also you're literally telling yourself, okay, I'm going to take this step that's taking me further away from how I want to look and what I think is like the best way to look, but I'm taking care of myself anyway. So that is you're literally taking the actions that help make your body image more positive, because you're saying, even though I might not like how I look when I start to gain weight, I'm doing this for myself and my mental and physical health anyway. So you're literally starting to embody that positive body image that we're talking about. So I would say really the way that you do that is you have to face these fears. You have to figure out what your fears are, where you're restricting, and then you have to actively face them and do these things in the face of that fear. And that's how it goes away.
Do you think that is possible and is real to recover fully of this toxic relation with your body, food, and exercise, and enjoying like a healthy life for your life?
Yes, I definitely think it's possible. So in the eating disorder world, full recovery is not a good place to strive for. Like a lot of people say, like, I'm always recovering. I'm never going to be recovered. I'm always going to have this eating disorder with me.
Or also that you go to the other extreme, is like you are like super intuitive and then you can't do exercise because that's against your body love and such. But actually, like you explain, if you get to this point of healing, I think that it's possible to achieve whatever goal you want, but from which point it's starting.
Yes. Yeah. So I believe that, in maybe some situations, because of course, I can't speak in generalizations, everyone's different, but there might be some situations where somebody had a really traumatic experience with anorexia, was maybe almost on the brink of death, or they had some really traumatic experience, or or their eating disorder is tied to trauma in their childhood that they have to actively work to resolve, which might take more time and more therapy and whatever. But I do believe that fully recovering from these things for the vast majority of people is possible, to where there's not a risk of you going back to a full-blown eating disorder. And I think just for some people, it could take more time. Like I said, if there's a lot of trauma involved, it could take years of therapy. Maybe going back to a fat loss goal, for instance, or something that requires, actively trying to restrict calories or limit calories or whatever. For some people, maybe that they won't feel quite comfortable with that. And that could be the case. But I would say for the vast majority of people, if you, again, face this is why I'm a huge advocate of letting go of every single restriction, like challenging every rule and restriction, because like we were just talking about, facing those fears is how you overcome them. So if you challenge each one of those restrictions, which is all based in fear, you are letting go of all those fears. You're facing them, and then you're proving to yourself, I don't have to be afraid of this. And then when you do that, that sets you up to have a completely free and healthy relationship with food. It sets you up to have a completely healthy relationship to your body, where whether you gain weight or you lose weight at different stages of your life, you know how to cope with that and feel okay with yourself because of that, because you've done this work. Once you're there, as long as you're always putting your physical and mental health first, I really agree with you. And I think that you can accomplish basically any goal that you want, as long as you're putting your physical and mental health first, which means that sometimes, sometimes maybe I say, oh, I'd love to go into a fat loss phase now and maybe like ramp up my training a bit, but work is really stressful. And maybe I'm going through a lot in my personal life right now. I know that if I go into a calorie deficit or I start training more, it's going to be too much for my body. So that might mean that goal has to be on hold. But in the long term, that's going to help me reach my overall goal of living a happy, healthy, full life, because I'm not going to sacrifice this short-term reward for, something that could mess with my health. And then I can do that later when I'm in a better place. So it's not the sexiest approach, because things might take longer, but it's the more sustainable long-term approach.
And I think that something important that we need to point out here is like, it doesn't mean that this kind of situation, like to be fully recovered, at least what it has been like after working with you, maybe you are not fully recovered. It doesn't mean that you will never have any fear or like any body issues or anything like that. But it means that we now have the tools to get to the point that to choose ourselves first, our physical and mental health first. So anything, it's possible, but we know which tools to apply in the moment that is like triggering anything to us. And I think that's the difference of like overcoming these fears.
Yes. And that's one thing I wanted to say is like, body image concerns and maybe certain, like you said, fears coming up here and there. Everybody deals with that. And like even people who have a good relationship with food, they might have those thoughts every so often. It doesn't mean you're going to be free from any sort of fearful thought. I mean, like fearful thoughts around food, probably not as much, but you might get a voice that says like, oh, you shouldn't eat that. And you're like, no, like, what am I talking about? But especially with body image, if you get pregnant and your body's going to change, when we go through menopause as women, your body's going to change a lot. You're going to have negative thoughts. Like I'll still have days where I'll have, some negative thoughts about my body, but one, it's not going to be as extreme because again, you've done all this work to heal and face your fears. You've literally been through weight gain and dealt with it. So you have that memory of that. And then also, like you said, you build a toolkit from going through that experience so that it's not going to mean you're free of any sort of worries at certain points. But like you said, you can deal with it in a more compassionate way. You have the tools to do it. So it's not going to become this huge deal because you're able to cope with it more.
Totally. And I would like you to tell me like 3 steps that someone that is like in this binging and toxic relationship with food, exercise, and body can take now to decide to like heal.
So I would say first thing is you have to start identifying all the ways that you are restricting. I'm going to say actually identify all the ways that you're trying to control your weight, because this is how restrictions come up, like we've talked about. So this is going to involve food. It's going to involve exercise, Probably those are going to be the main ones. And literally like, so think about it as if I was truly just with food, you could think about it as comparing yourself to full unconditional permission to eat, which means you eat when you want, what you want, until you don't want it anymore. So if that's a 10 on a 1 to 10 scale, where are you falling on that? Where would you rate yourself in that? And then it's probably going to be pretty low, that number, if you're binging and dealing with these things right now. So then you write out a list, like literally write out a bullet point list of what are all the things that are holding, like where's the gap between where you are now and you fully giving yourself that full permission to eat, and then write that all out, because this is going to help give you a specific things to work on to start breaking those restrictions and facing those fears. So I would do that, identify where you're being restrictive and be very honest with yourself, because a lot of times we don't see the ways that we're restricting or we want to deny it. Second thing I would say is, and this kind of goes along with that, but you want to work towards, again, that full permission to eat. So instead of thinking about eating when you're just, like we talked about, just eating when I'm hungry, stopping when I'm full, think more about the mental side of things. And I know, Carla, this was a big game changer for you when you came to the program, and this is a big game changer for everybody, is there's a difference between physical hunger and mental hunger and mental fullness. And that the mental cues are much more reliable and easier to listen to when you're first starting out. And if you do listen to those, they're actually going to help your physical cues come back and start to match up with each other, so that when you want food is around the time that you get hungry, and when you don't want food anymore is around the time that you get full. And this is what we're trying to work towards, is just being able to listen to these cues and then move on with our day and not have to worry about it. So
I have to tell there that it's important to do that, because you build like kind of trust inside your body and with the connection with your body. And also you get so much space to think and do things beyond food.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This is where the mental freedom really comes in, is when you start listening to this. So you want to work towards a place where you are listening to those mental cues above everything else. So you eat when you want food. You don't have to wait until you feel whatever physical hunger you think feels like for you. Don't wait until that. Eat when you have the desire to eat, and then stop. You might go past physical fullness, because your physical fullness is caught up with an amount of food that's clearly not enough, because it's causing you to binge, not get a period, have these other issues. So you want to really eat, listen to that mental hunger and that mental fullness, and you want to work towards that. So you might not be able to start there, because that might feel really scary. You might be like, oh, but I want to eat all day long then. And that's probably the case. So not everyone's ready to jump right into that, and that's understandable. This is where you can go back to the first step and you can start just working through those restrictions. You could say, okay, this week I'm going to do 2 of them. I'm going to eat at this time that I'm afraid to eat. I'm going to add carbs to my meals, or whatever your restrictions are. You can just start working through those and then keep taking those steps. And then eventually you'll get to that place. But you want to work towards that, where you're eating when you want and stopping when you don't want it anymore. And then the third thing I would say is, obviously, when you think about doing step 1 and step 2, the first thought that's going to come up is, oh my God, I'm going to gain so much weight. I'm so terrified to gain weight. So I would really recommend, like we talked about earlier and like Carla brought up, thinking and journaling why you are wanting to do this, why you're wanting to be free around food, why you want to stop binging, and really being clear on what the future could look like for you if this wasn't an issue for you, and getting very clear on the emotions, what's going to be possible in your life, how this will impact your family, your relationships, because it does go that deep. This is very linked. Eating disorders impact every area of our lives. And if you can remember that, that's going to help you take small steps in the fear of weight gain, in the face of the fear of weight gain, if you can remember the long term of what you're working towards.
This is awesome. These are really like game changer steps. And finally, Elena, I would like you to tell us how people can work with you, where they can find you.
Yes. So you can follow me at Elena Kunicki _RD. I think Maybe you could put that in the, I don't know, show notes,
Sure.
Carla, so that people know how to spell my name.
Yeah, I will put in notes.
So yeah, Elena Kunicki _RD. You can follow me on Instagram. That's where you'll learn about my coaching programs. Right now, I'm only doing group coaching, or I only have spots open for group coaching, but I have one-on-one coaching, group coaching. I have a membership. So there's a lot of different ways that you can work with me. You can find more information about that on Instagram. You can always shoot me a DM if you're interested, and we can talk through that and figure out what's the best option for you. And then I also have a podcast, which is the Weightlifting Nutritionist podcast. So that's where you'll get a lot of free informational content and kind of learn more about how you can start taking these steps.
Thank you so much, Elena. I don't know if you have forget something to tell us or you want to add something else.
I don't think so. I think this was great. We covered a lot of good stuff.
Okay, thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to share this with all my community.
Thank you, Carla. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to us. I hope that all these experiences and tools can become the boost that you need to dare to take that step that you have been thinking so much about. Please share this episode with whom you think is needing it. Take a screenshot and post in your media so more and more women will be able to live the life that they deserve. Whatever comment, suggestion, or thought you have, don't hesitate on texting. Just send a DM and we will be so glad to help you. Have a great day. Tons of blessings.